Hi guys, so here's a quick overview of the cardiovascular system. So with the cardiovascular system in your books, you'll notice that I want you to label all of the heart and its chambers and its valves. So make sure you get all of the heart and its chambers and its valves labeled correctly before you carry on with this presentation. So if you haven't done that, you may as well stop now. I'm going to go over with you the pathway of the blood. So here's it in a nutshell. Let me just get rid of, so you've got some space so you can see everything. It's not letting me. Anyway, so if you follow your finger from the inferior superior vena cava, and we'll follow the blood flow together. So it goes from the inferior superior vena cava to the right atrium. The right atrium fills up with deoxygenated blood, and then when the right atrium contracts, it goes through the tricuspid valve. The tricuspid valve is anchored by cordoni tendinis. It's anchored by that, and then when your right ventricle opens up and fills with blood. Once it's filled up, it will contract and can only force that blood through the pulmonary valve. It forces the blood through the pulmonary valve, a one-way system, and goes out through the pulmonary artery. So note here, it is going through an artery even though it's deoxygenated blood. It has to be an artery because arteries are thick and strong. So the right side of the heart goes through the pulmonary artery, and then the pulmonary artery feeds the left and the right lungs. So all those blood vessels split into millions and millions of capillaries that surround every single alveoli. The alveoli then takes the CO2 out of the blood that we breathe out, and the red blood cells with the iron on attract the oxygen and brings it back into the blood. Then the blood trickles back to the heart via the pulmonary veins. The pulmonary veins go into the left atrium. The left atrium fills up and forces through the bicuspid valve. The bicuspid valve is anchored on with strings called cordoni tendini. Cordoni tendini, when it's pulled and opened up, all the oxygenated blood will then enter the left ventricle. The left ventricle will fill up with oxygenated blood, and when that contracts, it forces open the atrial valve. When the oxygenated blood goes through the atrial valve, it then goes through the massive aorta, and this big aorta is where you'll find those chemoreceptors, which are measuring the levels of carbon dioxide in the blood. Anyway, as it goes through the aorta, this is where this massive, thick, strong artery branches down the abdomen, and as you can see, it feeds off to the brain and everywhere. Now learn your blood flow pathway. Okay, carrying on nice and fast for you, talking about layers of the heart. So you will need to know the layers of the heart. Inside the heart, you have a very, very smooth, slippery layer. And that smooth, slippery layer is called your endocardium. It lines the inside of the heart. If you ever go to the supermarket, buy a sheep's heart, open it up, and you can feel how smooth, and it's made of epithelial cells. Now, in the middle of your heart, it's basically the muscle. The muscle is called a myocardium, and the myocardium basically is there of specialized cardiac muscle cells, and it's basically there to contract to pump. Okay, so it makes the heart contract so it can pump the blood through, and it's involuntary. After the myocardium, then there are two little layers, but the layers, even though they're two layers, they basically will be doubling back on themselves. So there's an outer layer and an inner layer. The outermost layer is known as your parietal layer. So your parietal layer is basically joined onto your rib cage. That parietal layer joins onto the rib cage, and it will double back, and then it will hug the heart. As it hugs the heart, it creates a vacuum inside. Okay, well, the layer that's double back and hugging the heart is called your visceral layer. Okay, so these actual two layers are from the same makeup, but basically it's not like one layer cut off, another layer cut off. It's one layer that doubles back on itself and then hugs the heart. All right. Now, in between this space, it's vacuumed, but inside, in between this space, just like the lungs, the pleural space, this is known as the pericardial space. In this pericardial space is what we call pericardial fluid. That fluid helps lubricate so the heart can move 24/7. As you can imagine, this big muscle is moving lub dub all the time. This whole heart is moving. So in the space here, there has to have a fluid. Otherwise, if there wasn't a fluid, there'd be a lot of friction. If there's a lot of friction, you're going to get a lot of pain. If there's friction, you're going to get inflammation. That's called pericarditis. And there's a lot of information on that on the last slide. So know your layers. Endo inside, myo muscle in the middle, and then it's got your two pericardium layers, your visceral that hugs the heart, and your parietal that hugs the rib cage. Okay, moving on. Nice work, guys. All right, there's a few types of circulation, actually. You do have the coronary circulation and the pulmonary circulation and the systemic circulation is what we're going to learn about. But you also have something called your renal circulation and your hepatic circulation. Hepatic is to do with all the circulation that enters the liver, and renal is to do with the kidneys. But we're going to talk about the heart and the circulatory system. Now, your heart's a muscle. Every muscle needs to have a good blood flow to make it work. If you take away the blood flow, you've got a serious problem. Just like if you take away the blood flow from the skin and your basal cells can't divide, therefore you're going to get a skin ulcer. So this myocardium muscle has to have its own unique blood supply so it doesn't stop pumping. This system here is called your coronary circulation. It's in your books as well. So your coronary circulation, basically it is attached to your aorta. So as your left ventricle pumps up beautiful oxygenated blood out of your aorta, some of that gets diverted into your coronary circulation. Your coronary circulation hugs the heart and it feeds the myocardium muscle so it can keep on contracting all day in, day out, no matter what. Now, you've all heard of coronary bypasses or coronary event. That is when one of these arteries get blocked. And if these arteries are getting blocked and blood supply can't get to an area of the muscle, then an area of the muscle is going to die. And if an area of the muscle is not going to work, therefore the heart can't pump as a whole. And that is what's known as your myocardial infarction, commonly known as a heart attack. So normally a heart attack, 90% of the time, is due to something blocked in this coronary circulation. Cool. All right, going to two other types of circulation that you may have heard of. You've got a pulmonary circulation and we have the systemic circulation. Now, pulmonary means lungs. So your pulmonary circulation is basically when the blood, deoxygenated blood, leaves the heart, goes to the lungs, does its exchange, gets oxygenated and goes back to the heart. That is your pulmonary circulation. So leaves the heart, goes to the lungs, gets oxygenated, goes back to the heart. Leaves the heart deoxygenated, goes to the lungs, left and right, gets oxygenated, goes back to the heart. That little circulation is called pulmonary because it's just going to the lungs and to the heart and nowhere else. Now, everywhere else, when the heart is oxygenated and it leaves the aorta, if you follow my mouse, and it leaves the aorta and all this oxygenated blood is going to the upper body, all this oxygenated blood is going all down to the lower body, going on to internal organs, going everywhere, delivers all its oxygen and nutrients, picks up all the waste and comes back to the heart. That is known as your systemic circulation. So when you've probably heard the terminology, has the infection gone systemic? That might mean if you've got a cut in the arm and it's starting to get infected, if the infection has gone too far, the person is going to start having a fever. When the person is having a fever, it's a body's natural response to increase white blood cell to fight infection. If they're having a fever because of infection on their arm, it means that the infection is traveling in the blood, therefore it's gone systemically. It's not locally. Cool. All right, nearly there. Well done. Last but not least, so there's lots of different types of blood. No, not a lot of different type of blood vessels. In your blood vessel, you've probably already started to learn most veins, not all veins, but most veins carry deoxygenated blood. Veins are very thin and they are lax and they only have a very small, smooth muscle layer. Okay, because when the blood is received in the veins, it's at a low pressure. You'll notice arteries, on the other hand, are very thick and strong. They have a strong connective tissue and a small lumen. And the reason for this is because all the blood that goes through an artery is at force. So it has to have a very, very strong barrier around it so it can't burst. So veins are nice and thin. They also have valves. Now, when we talk about the valves and veins, that is to stop backflow. Every valve in the heart and the circulatory system is to stop backflow, just like a tap, just like turning a tap off. You don't want to turn the tap off and it's still to be leaking. That's not a good thing. So valves in the vein stop backflow. But if someone is stationary or they have a condition and these valves get put under lots of stress and these valves start to stop the blood, don't work properly, blood can start to pool in the veins, and that is known as varicose veins. Okay, and you don't want really that to happen because then blood can actually start to clot and congeal, which you don't want. Oh, and you have to be careful of as well. Okay, so your arteries are strong, and it's always 90% of the time oxygenated blood hitting the arteries, apart from when the deoxygenated blood leaves the heart, it goes into an artery because it's under pressure. Now, this is the important one. We talk a lot about capillaries. Now, capillary networks, as you can see, look at the difference. That this artery is thick and strong. This has got a bit thinner, but look how skinny a capillary is. It's one cell thick. So it has these junctions, and it's these junctions here where oxygen and nutrients can get out and also waste can climb back in to be taken away. So these capillary network, they can spread over tennis courts and tennis courts, all right? So you can imagine how these multiplied surrounding every single alveoli tissue in your lungs. It's a large, vast amount, but you can also remember how thin and skinny they are. So veins are thin and they carry blood at a low pressure, and most of the time it's deoxygenated. Arteries are thick and strong. They normally always carry blood away from the heart, and 90% of the time it's oxygenated. Capillaries are one cell thick, very, very thin, and it's where gas exchange occurs. Need to know. All right, what's in blood? So all that blood that's traveling around our body, if you were to put it into a centrifuge, and we've talked about this in class a lot, and separate it, what is actually in our blood? Okay, a lot of our blood, as you can see, is plasma, which is mainly water. But in that plasma, it's basically a medium to carry everything. It's a medium to carry all the cells that it needs. So in this plasma, not only do we have, of course, a lot of water, ions, proteins, nutrients, waste, gases, also not mentioned there, hormones and other chemicals. If you were to split it, there's a larger majority of red blood cells. Now remember, red blood cells are made up of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin carries iron. Iron attracts oxygen. All right, so red blood cells are made up of millions of hemoglobin. Iron attracts to hemoglobin, sits on hemoglobin. Iron attracts oxygen. So if you're low on iron, you're low on oxygen. Platelets, they are clotting agents if you cut yourself, so they're fantastic there for clotting and fixing any tears and scars inside. And white blood cells are there for fighting infection. Now they stay quite low and dormant while you're well, and as soon as you become unwell, they'll start multiplying as quick as they can. And just remember, there are 5 major types of white blood cells, leukocytes. They all are there to fight infection and protect immunity, but they also do different jobs as well, isn't it? So leukocytes, erythrocytes. I hope this little condensed activity helps you learn, and I'm going to the next page and it's all over. Have a good day. Thank you.